What's up, everybody? Welcome back to your favorite New York Jets subscription podcast, Badlands. I'm your host, Joe Caparoso. Little bonus Friday AM episode. Sometimes when there's so much shit happening in 1 week for the Jets, I like to just drop an extra one in. Not going to disrupt our regularly scheduled program. You'll still have Buck the Trend from Dan later today. You'll still have TOJ Talks from Will. We'll have our Sunday AM coffee, talking a little Garrett Wilson and some playoff picks for the weekend, and then back into our normal swing. Always ready and on call for an emergency pod, which I'm sure will happen sooner rather than later. What I'm going to do, quick one now, is I think if you're like me, it's just been an avalanche of interview requests and interviews. So I'm going to bring up our Discord and our very handy head coach, general manager, rumor Slack, and go through all the names that Andy has pinned and all the names that the Jets have requested for head coach and general manager, and give a very quick spit take on each of them and my POV on them, and maybe a couple predictions for where this thing lands, because I do think we'll have an answer. I'll call in the next 10 days, a little bit of a cushion before Senior Bowl. I don't think it's necessarily going to happen next week, but maybe early the week after. Just give us like a little notice, Jets, so I can plan accordingly with my, travel and preparation for emergency pods. Anyway, let's start with head coach. I'm just ripping through the names. These are requests. Some of these interviews have happened. Some haven't happened yet, but these are all the names. Aaron Glenn. We've talked about Aaron Glenn maybe more than any other head coach candidate on this feed. I'm a fan of Glenn. I don't buy into the Jets can't hire a guy with a defensive background, because coordinator to head coach, totally different role. I'd be curious to see what Glenn's staff is. I'd be curious to see who his offensive coordinator is, without a doubt. But he's not Robert Saleh. He's not Todd Bowles. You can't write off an entire half of the coaching world just because of the side of the football they're on. Spent a lot of time in a really good organization that's turned it around. Of course, has played for the Jets. Proactively declined an interview with the Patriots, which we all love. That's not a reason to hire him, but whatever. It's still fun. I think he has a chance to work. This is all coordinator roulette. Anyone acting like they know for a fact it's going to work and not work is lying to you. There's no reason to think that Glenn doesn't have as good of a chance of working as a head coach as Ben Johnson, who's everyone's fixated on. So I would not be mad if the Jets hired Aaron Glenn as their head coach, and I think there's a world where it could work out really well. Bobby Slovic, opposite end of the spectrum, not a fan, has not done a good job this year. I see him as sort of a middling offensive coordinator. Not a name I'd be particularly excited about. I think, Houston's success last year was a lot of CJ Stroud. I think you've seen some pieces fall off this year. Stroud regress a little bit. I don't necessarily love how that offense has looked. Don't see it. Joe Brady, coordinator roulette dart throw. The Jets have looked at him before. I do think he's done some good work in Buffalo. I really do. He's not just a full Allen merchant. He's kind of like the top of the second tier for me. I'd be open-minded to it. I get people's skepticism around it, but if you're keen to have an offensive mind, he's an offensive mind. He's familiar with the division. I understand there's been a couple of hiccups. The whole resume isn't perfect, but that's the same for every coordinator. So there's worse names on this list than Joe Brady is what I would say. Among them is Vance Joseph, who's been a head coach for 2 years in Denver, stunk at the job, and is back to what he should be doing now as a defensive coordinator. This is like hiring Robert Saleh again, in my mind, and maybe with a little less energy and stair running, but can't be rolling out Vance Joseph next year and expect people to get excited about it. Arthur Smith, probably my least favorite candidate. I will be absolutely Adam Gase level furious if the Jets hire Adam Gase. I already called him Adam Gase. Arthur Smith, that's exactly what he is, except maybe with like less overall success, because at least Gase made the playoffs with Miami. Mediocre offense, has shown he's not a good head coach, not the personality or energy the Jets need. Just don't. If anyone from the Jets listens to this podcast, and I know a few people do, don't hire Arthur Smith, man. Just don't do it. Ron Rivera, I'm more interested in Riverboat Ron as an assistant head coach or a defensive coordinator for a first-time head coach than being a head coach. I think his days of being an effective head coach are over. Had a really admirable career. Bring him in as an assistant head coach if you're hiring a first-time head coach like Josh McCown, who we're particularly excited about and who Connor made a very convincing and compelling speech on this podcast for. I think he's right up there with Aaron Glenn as a top candidate. Hire the right guy a year early, not a year late. It doesn't matter that he hasn't been a coordinator, because being a coordinator is not a prerequisite for being a head coach. He's got the energy, got the charisma. He's on a great staff this year. He's learned behind O'Connell. He's been in this franchise. I think if you're taking a shot, take a shot with McCown. And, please hire him before you hire some retread. Like Matt Nagy, who I'm terrified is going to be one of the finalists here, and I think he would be. He would be better than Arthur Smith, be better than Vance Joseph, be better than some of the worst names on this list. But I know people at the service level, they're like, oh, he made the playoffs with Mitch Trubisky twice. And you got to double click a little bit and how often he had to give up the play calling duty and how the Bears happened to get in at 8-8 despite losing the games they needed to win and then just got wiped in the first round of the playoffs. And the offense regressed every single year. I think he's a guy who just sort of fits well within the Chiefs organization. I am not sold he has the charisma or offensive acumen to be a really successful second-time head coach in this market. I am wary he will be a serious candidate. Mike Vrabel, we've talked about enough. I would say I think he's going to go to New England. The Raiders are also potentially in the mix now. Maybe I'll be pleasantly surprised and he ends up coming here, but feels like all roads end with the Patriots. So if he goes to the Patriots, I will tell you why he's a really overrated head coach. If he goes to the Jets, I'll tell you why it was a tremendous hire. I'm kidding. I'm not going to do that. It will suck if he goes to the Patriots. And that's all I have to say about that. Let's see. Brian Flores, a guy that we're higher on, I think, than most. I think Hardass did an excellent job with the defense, has spent some time on some really good staffs in recent years. I don't have a problem that he went head-to-head with Tua and Ryan Fitzpatrick has insulted him. If anything, that makes me more interested in him. Again, who's his GM? Who's his offensive coordinator? I think made chicken salad out of chicken shit in Miami in an impossible situation. So I think he's a top 3-ish candidate for me at this point. I'd probably narrow, I'd put Glenn and, McCown and him are kind of on the same tier. They're not going to get Vrabel. I think he'll be a serious candidate for this role. And Jet fans should be open-minded to it. Steve Spagnuolo, great defensive coordinator, bad head coach. We have a lot of documented history on this. I think it's a courtesy to get his name back in head coach interview conversations. I don't think he's a serious candidate, or at least I hope he isn't a serious candidate. Darren Rizzi did some nice work as an interim for the Saints this year in a bad situation. Maybe a coordinator hire. Do not hire him as your head coach. I don't think he's a serious candidate as a head coach. Same with Brian Griese, which I bluntly didn't know Brian Griese was coaching. I'm not going to act like I did. I, of course, remember the Jets playing against Brian Griese. Would be a pretty out of left field hire. And again, I think more of a 33rd team getting his name in the mix there. So this is not news. If you've been listening to Badlands, Glenn, McCown, Flores, Vrabel are the names I'm particularly excited about. Rex, yes, also interviewed. We've talked a ton about Rex. You could listen to our episode earlier this week for a POV on that. Not rooting for Rex to be the guy. If it gets to the point where it's Rex, Arthur Smith, or Vance Joseph, yeah, I'll take Rex. But let's not get to that point. GMs might get hired before the head coach. Arguably a more important hire than the head coach. Maybe, debatable. Can we get them in before the Senior Bowl? Alec Hallaby from the Eagles. Very smart guy. Eagles have a very deep front office. Didn't work with Joe Douglas. Very different background for Hallaby. Got sort of pegged by Cimini as sort of the analytics guy and was clapped back by someone around the Eagles who said he also knows football, he knows scouting. It's an interesting name, interesting background, and one that I don't know. I think he should be like a top 4, top 5 name. He's kind of out of left field, a guy that, like you, I've just done recent research on in the past week or so, not someone that I spent a lot of time thinking about during the Jets season. The background's pretty damn interesting, especially for an organization that needs some new forward thinking. Mike Borgonzi is a name we've talked about, not just this year, but in other years, I feel like, about the Jets needing a new GM. I think he would be a great hire. To say he's going to be a great hire is hard. I think he has the resume that merits getting an opportunity to be a general manager. And I think there's a good chance comparatively to other people on this list that it could work. I think he's a highly sought after candidate coming from a great organization. No, none of these hires are without risk, but I think if you're a Jet fan and you land Borgonzi, you're feeling pretty good about how the search went. Louis Riddick fighting with Jet fans on Twitter. Hasn't been in the front office in a while. Not feeling it. Jim Nagy, not feeling it. Don't think so. A name that I think, again, the Jets are getting out there as a courtesy. Not particularly excited about Ray Farmer, who they just interviewed. Didn't have a ton of success last time he was in this chair, and I think it'll be a hard one to sell. John Robinson, not a horrible resume on paper. I don't think he's going to be a serious candidate here. Okay, but not someone I think will be a finalist. Tom Dimitroff, I actually like his resume a lot and think he should be a finalist. I think he did a lot of good work in Atlanta. I like what he's doing now in terms of analytics and advanced scouting. I think he'd be an interesting mind to bring into the organization. I'd love if he could be like a VP of football operations paired with someone else. I don't know if that's realistic, but if they're going to hire a guy who's been a GM previously, they could do a lot worse than him. Grigson, absolutely not. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but anyone who gets Andrew Luck to retire before they're 30 because they cannot build an offense properly does not need to be the Jets general manager. It would be a very hard sell. Mike Greenberg, we've talked about a ton on this feed. Peter Schrager's done a good job sort of bringing his name to the light and telling his backstory. Guy who grew up a Jet fan, grew up locally, a bit of a whiz kid when it comes to the books and the numbers and the stuff he's done in Tampa. That's not a bad thing, and we shouldn't write off people when that's their primary skill set, but it's how is he going to build out the scouting department around him. A name I'm open-minded about, and I think Jet fans should be open-minded about too. Brian Gain, getting from the Bills, not terrible. I don't know. It's just not one that's particularly exciting to me. Spielman, another guy that we talked about in our Schrager podcast who did the sort of culture rebuild in Detroit that the Jets badly need, would be an exciting hire. A guy who went into a situation just as bad as the Jets and was a huge part of why it turned around. So you want to talk about the necessary skill set and experience, I think that would be a good hire. I think he should be one of the 3 finalists, along with Borgonzi, potentially Halby, and Dimitroff are the names that are more towards the top for me, along potentially with Greenberg. Don't know a ton about Trey Brown out of the Bengals organization. Don't know a ton about John Eric Sullivan, although apparently he's been, really critical on how the Packers have sort of managed the post-Rodgers transition, and the Packers front office, whether we want to admit it or not, has done good work building that roster. So a little more interested in maybe pulling from the Packers org than the Bengals org at this point, but reasonable enough names to talk to. I tweeted this last night based on when this is going to be dropped. And again, my 5 that I'm kind of circling around are Borgonzi, are Halby, are Dimitroff, Greenberg, are names that all, I'm particularly intrigued on, along with Spielman, of course, which kind of came out of left field and would be exciting. I don't know if the Jets get it done, but I'd be excited if that happened. We'll see if a few more interviews break through or not. So that is a full head coach, general manager rundown. Making a prediction, I think the Jets will make this hire. Like, I'm recording this on like January 9th. I think it's done by January 20th, at least the general manager. I don't want to steal Samini's prediction because he's been on Borgonzi Glenn for a while. I think from a betting odds perspective, like, that's your safest bet right now. So I think it's a logical guess. So I don't hate that prediction at the moment. I do think Glenn is the most likely to be the head coach. I would absolutely keep an eye on McCown. I do think Nagy is going to be more in the mix than Jet fans want, which is kind of scary. Waiting to hear some chatter about what happened in Rex's interview. It's been alarmingly quiet, maybe a little scary how quiet it's been. And GM, if they don't get Borgonzi, I think is kind of like wide open. I gave my favorites. It doesn't mean that they're actually like favorites in the room for the Jets. So we'll see. It's going to be a very interesting 10 days. Try to keep up. Join War Room if you haven't yet. The Discord will keep you up to date on everything. And look out for more content. Thank you, everyone who's recently joined. It's been like a crazy surge of patrons in the past like week, which is awesome. And I get because the offseason is like prime time for the Jets. And if you just joined, there will be something on the feed every single day. We have 2 tiers, Deep Dive and War Room. War Room, you're getting extra content every week. You're getting extra video content. You're also getting our Discord, which is just bluntly the best Jets community out there, period. I put it up against anyone out there, sorry. And I love all Jet fans. And as a reminder, we're going to have a 6-part docuseries on the Douglas Sala era called Streets of Fire that will start February 10th. 6 episodes. We actually start recording this weekend because, why not be recording every day? So thank you, everyone, for listening. We'll talk to you soon.